We're literally just asking for the bare minimum that any normal country would require to keep our people safe, to keep immigration sustainable so it doesn't hurt our infrastructure, so it doesn't bring crime to our country. And we're the fascists? You're having a laugh. I think it's really dangerous.
Has the word fascist lost its meaning now in modern politics? Because it seems to be thrown around an awful lot.
It's a breath of fresh air, especially after sort of the demeaning and demonising comments of certain footballers who've come out and
Former footballers,
blaming angry middle-aged white men for all the division in the country.
It is the start of the week, so let's get you energised with a huge dose of the Daily Expresso. I'm JJ Anisiobi, and today I'm joined by the wonderful Belinda DeLucy. Belinda, looking radiant as ever.
Thank you so much. You like my new dress?
I do. You're supporting Zach Polanski?
No, it's a rebellion, a magnet against that. I'm reclaiming my green.
A serious question.
Yeah.
Seriously now. How are you feeling? Are you okay?
I'm really good. Thank
Okay.
you. Why are you asking?
I ask because you are associated with the Reform Party,
Yes.
and a lot of people have been getting attacked recently who are Reform members, a lot of your people. On our Friday episode and throughout last week, we spent some time chatting about the escalation of insults between Sir Keir Starmer and Nigel Farage. This came after Starmer used his party conference speech to call Farage an enemy of Britain, which of course had come hot on the heels of David Lammy claiming Farage once flirted with Hitler Youth when he was younger. What a thing to say. Of course, Lammy then rode back on this and came up with a whole heap of different excuses. However, the political aggression has been dialed up a few degrees after Britain's youngest council leader was physically attacked. Reform UK politician George Finch, he's literally 19 years old. He's a kid, but he was branded a racist and a fascist during the street assault on Friday night. Now, Farage has condemned the attack and said the language used echoes the Prime Minister's disgraceful attack on Reform during the Labour conference. And it really does, Belinda, which is why I asked you at the start, are you okay? Because you used to be a spokesperson for Reform.
Yeah,
I think people recognise you in the street as being, being
Yes.
part of the Reform Party, but you've not been attacked. You've not felt.
Not yet. I mean, but Labour's plan is clearly working. I mean, I can only imagine they witnessed what happened to Charlie Kirk in America and the rhetoric used against him to incite that horrific assassination and thought, we'll have some of that here. I think it's entirely deliberate. I think it's the only tactic they can use against the vast majority of Brits who will not surrender their country to the unholy alliance of globalism, socialism and Islamism that's going on. I think they have no arguments left. So they want to terrify people into staying indoors, frighten people into publicly speaking out again in support of Reform. It won't work. It hasn't scared me off yet. I feel enormously for George Finch. I met him, really lovely, lovely young man, incredibly brave. You can imagine as a teenager, putting your head above the parapet in the kind of climate of hate in schools and universities towards Reform at the moment. Incredibly brave thing to do. He's a hero for the young generation. I applaud him immensely. Very well-mannered, polite young man. I'm so sorry this happened to him. And of course, there was a young woman with him at the time. The man who attacked him mirrored the same rhetoric that Keir Starmer has been using, David Lammy has been using, Jack Polanski from the Green Party has been using. He can't get enough of the word fascist, fascist, fascist. See, that's all he comes up with. And it feels like a cult that unless you belong, you are then the enemy, unless you adhere to. But I'm telling you, it means we are doing something right because we are upsetting all the right people, the establishment that wants to completely unravel England and the UK and make it in their own new image of, as I've mentioned before, this sort of strange cluster of disunited nations, divided, suspicious of each other. That's what identity politics does. That's what the left wants. And of course, Reform wants national unity. We want to judge people on the content of their character and their abilities, not what race or sexual orientation they're from, but apparently we're the fascists. Well, I look around and I look to see who is most fascist-like in this country. You've got the hatred for the Jews coming from many left-wing movements. There was a young man at the weekend outside Oxford University with Oxford University students trying to get the crowds to chant, Gaza, Gaza, make us proud, put those Zios in the ground, which is an incitement to murder. Now, Zio is a term coined by the KKK for Jews. This is the kind of language we hear from the hard left and Islamo-fascists in this country. Us right-wing thugs over here, we don't incite hatred to anyone. We're literally just asking for the bare minimum that any normal country would require to keep our people safe, to keep immigration sustainable so it doesn't hurt our infrastructure, so it doesn't bring crime to our country. And we're the fascists? You're having a laugh. I think it's really dangerous. I have had episodes in my life, certainly when I was in the Brexit Party, when we were in Southampton and the election results came in and I won a seat with Nigel in southeast England. Caroline Lucas was there with what looked like a mob of meat depraved thugs, but and when I stepped off the stage, one of the men came running up to me, shouting at me in my face, pointing at me so close with so much aggression that a man had to step in and separate him from me because of the threat of violence, calling me fascist Nazi. I was just a mum of four, just wanting to reallocate powers back from the EU to the UK. I had groups meeting me at King's Cross Station back from the European Parliament shouting fascist at me. This is how they work, because they will never be able to win an argument. So they want to frighten people out of politics. But I say, tighten your sinews, metal up that green pastures in your blood and bones and defend this country like our ancestors did. Courage calls to courage, JJ.
Has the word fascist lost its meaning now in modern politics? Because it seems to be thrown around an awful lot.
I think the left, sadly, have completely hollowed out the word fascist. I think more sadly, the word racist has been completely hollowed out. And the victims of real racism out there do not benefit from the left weaponizing this sort of language to try and frighten people from speaking. The trans activists did this as well to women, because I was very much part of the women's groups that wanted to defend single-sex spaces. They would threaten violence. They would throw smoke bombs at us. Poor J.K. Rowling, got death threats. This is how they act because they know their argument has no substance and is fantasy. So they use fear and violence.
In the same way that Farage calls out the far right and says he doesn't want those people to be part of reform, do you think some of the left leaders, the Starmers, the Zaplanskis, should be calling out these Antifa, we'll call them, thugs who go around with their faces completely covered and attack people verbally like yourself?
They won't, because they're in their preferred favoured groups. And as I mentioned before, what identity politics does, it creates a hierarchy of victimhood. And sadly, if you're at the bottom, like white working class men, Jews, white working class girls, in Rotherham, Rochdale, if you're at the bottom of that, they won't care who does what to you because you're not in their special favoured groups. So I doubt they will call it out. I do think it's a worry. I feel for the Reform MPs and for the Reform councillors, and I want to recognise their courage and bravery for standing up for millions of us who want a complete regime change to get our country back to work for our children. JJ, you want your son to have a house to buy, to have a job after university, to be able to live safely on the streets, tough law and order. These are reasonable global norms. These aren't, far right. But yes, I don't think Labour will call out the real threat of fascism in this country. Okay.
Absolutely fabulous legend Joanna Lumley has given her hot take on the current migrant crisis, saying a country like the UK cannot support unlimited migration. Maybe she's right. She insisted more needs to be done to improve stability and opportunities in developing countries, while explaining that crises such as a lack of food, infrastructure and warfare is the driving force behind a lot of world migration. Again, she has a point. Calling for the debate around the issue to be refocused, she said, I think we've stopped looking at what the problems are when there are these great shifts of people. Of course, a tiny country can't support millions and millions of people, but we've got to start thinking outwards a bit more. She continues, we've got to start thinking, how can we go to that country and get fresh water to irrigate their land? I mean, this all seems to make sense to me. It doesn't sound wrong. Perhaps people are going to listen to her message more because everyone likes ABBA, everyone loves
she's the
Dame
acceptable
Joanna.
face of the immigration debate, if you like.
Yeah. And she's saying it in a way that I don't think many people are going to come out and say, no, well, that sounds racist. She's saying, well, yeah, she, as you say, she's the acceptable face of it. What do you take from her comments?
It's a sigh of relief that more and more people, especially from that sort of lovey world of acting, are coming forward. I mean, we had the brave Ryan Clark, that lovely, lovely young man on Good Morning Britain.
Ryland
Clark. I think he's from
Ryan
Boyzone
Clark?
or something. Ryland Clark.
Yeah.
And of course, he got smeared as fascist and stuff on Twitter for doing that. Very reasonable comments. Joanna Lumley made incredibly gentle way of saying, we are I mean, England is very, very small. France and Germany are almost 3 times as big as England. And as much as the UK is suffering as a whole, England is taking the brunt of the mass immigration. And we are a very small country with an infrastructure that is buckling even before the Boris wave. So I'm really pleased that she came out and mentioned it. We also had Rupert Everett recently, who is another very liberal, lovely presenting actor. I was so impressed when he came out saying the Conservative and Labour record has pushed him further and further to the right wing. And I thought that was stunning and brave. And it's a breath of fresh air, especially after sort of the demeaning and demonising comments of certain footballers who've come out and
former footballers,
blaming angry middle-aged white men for all the division in the country. I mean, that is not only is it utter and total nonsense, but they're playing into this, attack people who look like me narrative, whereas Joanna Lumley said something sensible. The only thing I would slightly disagree on her about is she then followed it up with, we must now focus on basically helping all these countries become better so they don't need to flee. Well, I think I've come to the point where there's a certain fatigue about this. I think the British public are not responsible for constantly making other countries better so they don't, break into our country or come here en masse. It is not our responsibility. Britain went through famines and civil wars and, you name it, plagues, but they stayed. They sacrificed blood, sweat and tears, and they built their own country up. I think that's what we should be encouraging, and maybe through great trade deals, trade and not aid to poorer countries, that really, really helps. But I do think the Brits are a bit fed up of being constantly told they have to take money away from, their food table to give to foreign affairs all the time. Definitely advise them and help them grow. But I think we should focus on our country more than others and just have really tight, strong border controls. I mean, the highest group of asylum seekers last year were Pakistanis. Now, when you think about it, Pakistan is not a country that everyone would assume, it's been in civil war for years, nothing like that. So it's not, Joanna Lumley was suggesting that, everyone coming here seeking asylum is from these terrible countries, but, they're just poorer. And that's unfortunately not what the UK needs right now. We need to minimise immigration to very high skilled and those who contribute. Very welcoming to those. I welcome. My family's, mixed race, it's mixed religions, it's all sorts. It's a wonderful British united family. And unfortunately, they took smart immigration away from us, JJ, because it was uniting us. And the one thing Westminster doesn't want is a united, positive, happy family. They much prefer divisions because you can control people through fear.
Some people watching this are going to say, well, a reform going to take on the billionaires, the super, super rich, because if we stopped immigration tomorrow, the small boats ones, let's say, we stopped all of those, I'm still not going to be able to go and get a doctor's appointment tomorrow. My grocery prices aren't going to come down magically. Should we be going after the rich people then instead? And I mean the very, very richest. I'm talking about the Musks, the Apples, the Amazons, who get huge amounts of tax relief so they can operate over here. They're making billions and not putting billions back into the country.
Yeah, I think there's a fine balance. What Labour's done is literally scare millionaires away from the UK. They're wealth creators, they're job creators, and they're all running a mile from a Labour government. I know many people who are leaving because of Labour just wanting to hard tax anyone who's achieved or successful to make us all equal in our own misery. That's their plan. No, I think reform will take a very, very common sense approach to it. I think people should pay their fair share of tax, especially the big global giants, but we also need to make the UK appealing for them to set up their head offices here because they do create jobs and they do boost the economy. The number of millionaires that left in the last year was equivalent to 500,000 average paying Brits taxpayers' money disappearing from our NHS, disappearing from our schools. That's the problem. And I know the sort of politics of envy that come from Labour just don't even care about that. They just want to stick it to the rich and make them suffer. I do think we need to bring them back. Clearly, the mega giants need to pay a lot of money because they can afford it. But really, our entrepreneurs, those that want, who would start up a business here now, JJ?
Yeah.
If you're a young person, you'd find somewhere else with lower corporation taxes. Who would set up a pub? They're trying to kill off pubs with all their business taxes and their national insurance hikes that make it impossible to employ staff. I mean, Labour are taxing jobs, for goodness sake. So economic growth, I can't imagine going up until we get Labour out.
Okay. Now, good news. Today, all remaining living hostages were released by Hamas and returned to Israel. And now Israel are returning over 1,700 Palestinian prisoners back to Palestine. It really is a diplomatic feat of epic proportions after so much death and destruction over the last couple of years. Now, who was the key mediator in all of this? Drum roll. It was the UK. Apparently, or not quite. But it's a claim that's been made by Bridget Phillipson, who the US ambassador to Israel has now labelled as delusional. The Education Secretary made the claim on Sky News that the UK played a key role in shaping negotiations for a ceasefire in Gaza. This is the first I've heard of it because I don't think actually we did anything. It's clearly all been Trump. But regardless, speaking this morning, she defended the UK's efforts towards ending the war in Gaza, where a fragile truce is holding following an agreement brokered by US President Donald J. Trump. Asked what this contribution involved, she said, "These are complex matters of diplomacy that we are involved in, but we do welcome and recognise the critical role that the American government played in getting us to this point." The critical role? The only role? It was completely America. Look, regardless, Phillipson's claims were rejected by US Ambassador Mike Huckabee, who was part of Trump's negotiating team for the peace deal. Huckabee said on X, "I assure you, she's delusional. She can thank Donald Trump anytime just to set the record straight." I'm so embarrassed by this. As a proud Brit and a supporter of democracy, why is this clown, Bridget Phillipson, going around and saying that, well, yeah, Britain have played a vital role in this? No, we haven't. All we've done is sell Israel more and more weapons and then declare Palestine a state 2 minutes before Trump's been able to go in and say the war's over.
Utterly humiliating day for Labour and the British government. Lies just drip off their tongue. My God, key role, what, making coffees? I don't understand. They're telling us not to believe what we see with our own eyes.
Yeah.
This is very much fantasy land for them. And I think it's a huge insult to those brave enough to get round the table for Donald Trump to have suffered. I mean, that man has suffered, more death threats and assassination attempts. And yet he has stood strong and he is the peacemaker. He is the king of anti-fascism. It is Islamofascism in Palestine. They didn't want the best for the Palestinian people.
No.
In fact, when the ceasefire was agreed, there's images of them executing Palestinians who were seen as either troublemakers or helping the opposition.
Israel,
This is an evil cabal, and Donald Trump has stopped it. And I do think he has really shown up European leaders for the invertebrates they are. And if Keir Starmer did anything, he actually dangerously hindered the peace protests by coming out with this sort of reward for Hamas, by recognising the Palestinian state without a requirement to release the hostages. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Can you imagine doing that at such a fragile, sensitive time in negotiations? Keir Starmer did that, not to help the Palestinian people. That was political posturing. That is either from pressure he's got from I don't know which groups, but it's to keep their careers, to keep their seats as MPs, with the Islamist pressure as well that is growing in Parliament. This is why he did it, and I think that's a really dangerous way to do foreign policy. So, and I'll read you this. This is what the Israeli Deputy Foreign Affairs Minister said in response to Bridget Phillipson's key role remarks. The Israeli Deputy Foreign Affairs Minister said Labour's role was opposite of a key role in peace. They were deeply unhelpful in terms of timing.
Wow.
So the truth is out. So unfortunately, it's a real embarrassment. And to think what Labour has sacrificed for this global reputation he's so desperate for. He doesn't care about national reputation. He's never here. It would be nice if he paid a visit to England, UK once in a while. It's this kind of Oh, I've lost what I was saying. Sorry.
Never mind. I can see you're so frustrated.
I'm
as
so
we all are.
frustrated. I feel like we're living in this really surreal world where we've been taken over by a foreign occupying force, and we're all sort of underwater, struggling to get to the surface, seeing our country completely unravel and get destroyed without being able to do anything about it. Because it's not just Keir Starmer's government. I think there's a sort of shady cabal of powerful sort of technocrats behind the scenes that are pulling these strings. Think about the Chinese spy scandal that's going on at the moment. The voting against the grooming gang inquiry, the handing away British territory to one of China's allies. I mean, who do they work for? Who do they represent? And I hope, if reform get in, there can be a massive public investigation into exactly how these decisions were made, why they recognise Palestine as a state exactly at that moment, at that fragile moment in the peace process, without asking for hostages to be released. Thank God they've been released.
Yeah.
But I find it a very, very bittersweet day.
Yeah. Well, let us know in the comments below. Who do you think is running the country? Is it this crazy cabal of secretive men in grey suits? Let us know in the comments. Now, moving on. Tourists were left stunned as a man brazenly urinated on a Vatican altar during Holy Mass. This all in full view of hundreds of worshippers. The shocking act of desecration unfolded inside St. Peter's Basilica on Friday morning. Now, this unidentified man climbed the steps of the altar of confession, which is, by the way, one of the most sacred spots in Catholicism. It's where the Pope himself traditionally celebrates Mass. Once this lunatic got to the top, he dropped his trousers, dropped his kegs to his ankles, and began urinating over the holy site. The disgusting scene took place during the 9 a.m. Holy Mass, where stunned visitors looked on in disbelief. Security officers raced towards the man as the crowd gasped, and they took him out. I'm so disgusted. I'm a proud Catholic. I'm so disgusted by the story. I saw the video footage. All I would say is, if this was in my local church, this geezer would not have gotten out unscathed. He would have been dragged out with his head being banged off every step outside of there. It's not very Christian of me. I don't care. I cannot have someone desecrating our holy sites. What was your reaction to this?
Just great sadness. I do think there is a sort of acceptable open season against Christians at the moment. There were 9,000 crimes committed in or against UK churches in the last 3 years. That's arson, that's criminal damage.
Yeah.
There was the awful scenes of a young man ripping a cross from a London church just a couple of years ago. And the horrific slaughter of Nigerian Christians.
Right.
72,000 have been slaughtered by radical Islamists in Nigeria since the year 2000 by Boko Haram. That's the sort of Hamas, ISIS equivalent.
Yeah.
They're all part of the same.
They're the ones who stole all the girls, and we had all the
The 300 Nigerian girls.
With the saying, bring our girls home.
Yeah.
That was viral for a little bit, and now no one cares.
The human suffering that radical Islam has caused the world, and including moderate Muslims, because actually in Nigeria, 34,000 moderate Muslims were killed by these radical Islamists as well. They're no one's friends. They hate everyone. And yet, it's the one word Labour won't ever mention. And I think for Christians, I'm a Christian, I'm Church of England, but you're close you're close to converting me if you're going to beat up some bloke weeing in the church. But I have to say, and I go to church every Sunday, the church is open for strays to come in. So I've been in a service where homeless, drunk men come in and shout and, cause a bit of trouble. And I think the church position is the door has to remain open to everyone from every level of, from poverty to, being billionaires, anyone from any background. And I get that. The problem is the Church of England, and it has such a weak leadership. And although my faith is incredibly strong, I feel absolutely let down by the leadership. And I just feel they have nothing to do with me. I continue with my faith. And Christianity is so part of the fabric of Europe. We are all cultural Christians, even if we're not believers. My dad doesn't believe. He's agnostic. And he's a church warden because he feels very much protective over the local church, wants to keep it open.
Yeah.
I think reform should bring in a law that protects historic churches churches and pubs, for that matter, from being converted, and keep them under a trust. So to keep them open, because they are integral to our culture and who we are as people. And I think what's happening at the Vatican, I know it happened in February as well. At the Vatican, a man jumped on the altar and threw off all the candelabra. And I said this church is being set on fire all over Europe.
Yeah.
All we've heard about is Gaza for the last 2 years. The number of attacks on Christians. I mean, they used to be so prominent in the Middle East. I know in Iraq before ISIS took over, there was about 1.4 million Christians in Iraq. There's now only 300,000. You know, that they're getting rid of them. And yet our leaders never talk about them, our church leaders. And even the Pope, I don't feel, puts enough pressure, certainly on the media, to highlight how Christians are getting attacked around the world and the cause behind the attacks. It's not just Islamism. It is left-wing cultural Marxism that wants to rip Christianity away from our heritage and who we are as a people. So I'm sad, but I tell you what, I don't wish any harm on the guy for desecrating.
Better than I am, mate.
I do, because that's just not the way, JJ. It's not the way.
They should let us desecrate on him. That's
No, very nice image there.
An eye for an eye, it says in the Bible. That's what we should be
Old
doing.
Testament business, that. You Catholics, my God.
Belinda, thank you so much for
Pleasure.
joining us today. That is all we have time for. The caffeine has worn off. Thank you for watching the Daily Expresso. Join me again tomorrow when I'm joined by former Tory spin doctor Charlie Rowley. Bye-bye.